Hello, beauties. Welcome to Moms Unboxed, a podcast where I unbox with you the how-tos, tips, and tricks to empower women to upgrade relationships, intimacy, and parenting. I'm your host, Melanie Carolyn, a multi-dimensional woman, life coach, lover, and mom who's made a lot of fucking mistakes. If you want to live a sensual and liberated life, you've come to the right space. Don't forget to follow Moms Unboxed because you don't want to miss an episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Moms Unboxed podcast. I hope you mamas are doing well this week, and if it's not, I trust that'll turn around for you because we have an amazing guest, Dr. Dana Culp, with us to talk about menopause and the experiences that women go through when we are going through that season of our life and the changes that we're enduring and how that can affect not only our bodies, but our confidence and our libido. Dr. Dana, please say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much for taking the time. This is something I'm very interested in because as I'm aging, I am noticing the bodily changes. Can I just tell them to you? Because I haven't been able to speak on this, and I feel like you're the perfect person to just hold the space.
Let's talk.
Okay, so I am getting hot more. I am noticing my pubic area region, like the hair is just like spreading to my legs. And I'm like, what is that? And, of course, my hair is graying, and I've just recently decided to diet, and I don't know if that has anything to do with menopause, and I'm noticing like I'll go through fluctuations of having a low libido and just these subtle bodily changes. It has me like ultra aware of what I'm ingesting in my body and my sleep patterns. Like it's waking me up in a sense, but it's also diminishing my confidence. Do you have anything to speak to? Is that normal? Am I crazy?
Absolutely. This is a very big topic in my office with my patients every day. It comes up in almost every conversation. There are real changes that start happening in perimenopause, so the period of time before menopause, and then of course after menopause, it can be much, much more dramatic. And everything from physical changes that make it challenging to have intimacy, whether that is diminished lubrication, arousal, ability to orgasm, some physical changes like you described that are a little disconcerting sometimes. And then the desire. Desire is, sometimes we're tired and sometimes we're stressed and sometimes, but it is a persistent lack of thinking about sexual activity with or without a partner. And if there is a partner involved, that can be exceedingly challenging and for a relationship, because that part of a relationship can be really important for a lot of couples. So this is a big topic. It is very common, and I say let's dive into it.
Yes. Well, thank you for that confirmation. And maybe that is the experience I'm having, is like this premenopausal state where women start noticing the subtle changes, not only in the physical self, but the energetic self. And you hit on such a good note: desire, the desire and the drive to want to be intimate. Sounds like it's diminished during premenopausal. That's what you're saying?
It can be, not for everybody. And libido is really a complicated concept. It's not just physical, it's not just mental, it's a combination of those. So, we have to be in the right headspace, And so during this time when we have potentially hormonal fluctuations and hormonal chaos, that is not in your head. It can actually change how we think about desire, even if our physical body is functioning as we expect it to. And that can be confusing, because if we're participating, say, for instance, in a sexual activity, and our body isn't responding the way it did before, that, that just changes everything. And I think that, again, with or without a partner, having that sexual energy about us, because we all are sexual beings, and that gets expressed to one degree or another. Without that energy, I think it really changes who we are, how we show up in the world, whether we're participating in the activity or not. It just is this, it just lends to the zest for life and enthusiasm for life and this energy. So it's not, I don't think it's a small thing. And again, even if we're not actively participating, say with a partner, and we have those changes about us, it can be where we don't even recognize ourselves anymore.
Yeah, that must be so difficult for women who are actively going through this transition. And I speak to my clients a lot about sensuality and pleasure, not just in the bedroom, but it sounds like what you're saying is that we could lose our zest and our sensuality and passion for life. Would you say that menopause can lead to some depression?
Oh, that's very common. That is very common. So let's just set some language here for a moment. So I think we've all heard the word menopause, and we immediately think of our grandmas. So menopause, it technically is when a woman doesn't have a menstrual cycle for 12 months. And that period of time for 80% of women will happen anywhere between the age of 45 to 55. And then we have a period of time called perimenopause, which is before menopause. And that is a time where our hormones are starting to fluctuate, or in early menopause, as our ovaries are starting to kind of wear out, for lack of a better word. And then it transitions to a more chaotic hormonal changes as we get into later perimenopause. Once we hit menopause, our ovaries have hung up their hats, and now we're in a state of perpetual deficiency. So going back to the definition of menopause and happening anywhere from 45 to 55, we know that perimenopause, the period of time leading up to that, can be as long as 10 years. So doing that math, if you're 45 years old having your final menstrual period, you could be as young as your mid 30s and start to notice these changes, which just sounds so young. I know that, but it happens. And it happens for most people. It starts off gradually, and then it becomes more chaotic and more disruptive and challenging in our lives. So when you mentioned depression, that is the mental changes that can happen: depression, anxiety, sleep problems, agitation, rage, a lot of personality changes like that can be just so out of character for someone. I know for myself, I had all of those, and having never had issues with that before. And if you can imagine how disruptive that is, and how you just don't see yourself the same anymore. So the hormonal fluctuations are really hard on our brains, back to where the libido can live, and it just disrupts everything. So there can be a lot of mental health challenges during this time, along with physical changes.
Wow, that's so impactful for women. And I think it's so important, mamas, if you're listening, to send this to your spouse, your family members, so that they can understand what it is you may be experiencing now or will be experiencing. Because I don't think that there's enough grace given towards women who are going through these changes. And you mentioned women could be sleep deprived. They can have rage, depression, anxiety, and overwhelm. And that's a lot to carry when we're caring for our children or trying to be a good partner. And there's this guilt that women have, especially around trying to exceed and be the best at all the roles that we play in the midst of going through all these changes. And you stated you had a story where you were trying to get help, and it was just like this doctor gave you this one and all medication that was supposed to fix it all. Can you share your personal experience with us?
Yeah, definitely. I think my experience is sadly not uncommon. So if somebody can see themselves in this story, or maybe avoid what I had to go through, because it was devastating, to be perfectly honest. So So my story began several years ago, and I started having a lot of the physical and mental and emotional changes that can come with that period of time in the hormonal chaos. I started gaining a lot of weight. I had low level anxiety, depression, I think, but it was more like I just didn't want to do any of the things I love to do that I previously loved to do. And I've never been an anxious person or a depressed person. A lot of brain fog, struggling, word finding, keeping track of my very complicated life. And couldn't sleep, was pretty dissatisfied with a lot of things in my life, had lost joy. My personal relationship was really in dire straits. And believe it or not, even though I had been taking care of women for a very, very, very long time, I did not make that connection of what was happening to me was hormonally driven. I know all the words and everything, but I couldn't see it in myself. You kind of touched on this, that we are very busy. Our lives are very complicated. We might have kids, a busy career, community commitments, and friends, and things we love. And life can be hard to juggle sometimes. So I, like many women, just assumed if I tried harder and I did better and I did more, that I could fix these things. It wasn't until my blood pressure started going up that I actually decided to get some help. And again, didn't notice these other symptoms as being part of what was happening hormonally. But luckily for me, I did have just a little seed in my head that maybe I couldn't sleep because of hormones, and maybe my blood pressure was going up because I couldn't sleep. That was it for me. That's all I made the connections. So I waited a very long time, many weeks, to get to this appointment that I needed so bad with my primary care provider. And when I got there, she immediately said, "This is not what's happening. It's not hormonal. I'm not comfortable talking about this. You're going to need to see somebody else. And here's a blood pressure pill, and have a nice day." I was in tears, just so dismissed. It was so humiliating. And I want to touch on the fact that I walked into that appointment with basically being a colleague of this person. We take care of the same patient population. I know the language. I know how to navigate the system. I know how to advocate for myself. I was a peer in this appointment. And I was just dismissed out of hand. So that piece was really knocked me on my heels. I then went to 2 different OBGYNs, because aren't they the ones who take care of women? And each of those appointments that I had to wait a long time to get those appointments, by the way, same thing. The first one gave me a prescription, said, "Here you go. I'll see you in a year." I took it happily. I didn't know any better. And I found out later, nobody prescribes that anymore that knows what they're doing in midlife women's care. I did feel a little bit better, so I was a little bit thankful for that piece, but that was really scary to realize what really poor care I got at that appointment. Then I went to a very highly regarded Stanford OBGYN. So I was really excited for that appointment. And it was the same thing again. She had a one-size-fits-all approach. Here's your prescription. I was a little bit more educated at this point. I knew about different options, and I wanted to have some more different conversations about what my options were and how I could do this different or better. And she had a one-size-fits-all. She said, "No, this is what we're doing. Here's your prescriptions, and I'll see you in a year." And that was appointments what changed everything for me. Again, I go in on more of an even playing field than the vast majority of women do. And I bring this up for a reason, and I'll circle back on that. But at that appointment, that's when I had the fire lit under me and realized what a horrific gap we have in women's healthcare in this stage of life, maybe not having to do with reproduction. And then I just read every study. I got certified. I went to classes and conferences and just got as educated as I could, because I really realized now that I needed to help women. And slowly my mission became completely and only helping women. But ultimately, with the hopeful piece, armed with all of this new knowledge, I did go to my fourth provider, who I'm with still today. She was primary care family medicine. And she first said, "Hey, I don't know anything about this, but I'm willing to listen to you and to learn." And so we were able to come up with a plan driven by me. But since then, she's learned so much, and she's helping women. And so that was a long story, but coming from what bad shape I was in that I didn't even realize, to coming out the other side where the lights are back on and the color and the joy is back in my life and I feel like the best version of myself. Seeing that opposite, that dichotomy, is so striking and makes me just really just want that for every single woman to not have to go through what I did and not have things get so bad before she gets help. So planting those seeds of, if we're lucky enough to live long enough, we will outlive our ovaries. And for the vast majority of women, they're going to have some of these symptoms, if not all, to some degree. And having women not be afraid, feel exciting and hopeful when this comes, and not think about that next stage, as I think so many of the women before us who thought of getting older, of just a slow slide into deterioration and irrelevancy and not having your body work the way it did before and your mind work the way it did before. It does not have to be that way. The second act can be just full of so much excitement and power and joy. That's my story.
Wow. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and you're willing to share your story. I'm sure there are women out there who can relate to that story. And what is your suggestion when women go to these doctors or OBGYNs and they're just dismissed? It takes so much time, energy, and effort to look for a new doctor, to do the research. You know, as you said, you went to 3 different doctors before you're like, I'm doing my own research. So what do you suggest for the everyday mama out there who just feels exhausted by that?
That's actually a really big part of my work, and actually why I'm with you and why I do so many interviews and workshops. You know, there's only so many hours in the day that I can't see all the patients. So what I want to do is speak to exactly what you're talking about, planting the seeds, having women feel empowered and knowing how to get help. So going to a doctor's appointment, especially a new doctor's appointment, is we have to maybe take the day off of work and get babysitters and pay for parking. And it's a lot just to get to a doctor's appointment for most of us. So what I suggest, especially if this is a new person, and OBGYN doesn't mean they know everything about this space, and doesn't mean there's not great OBGYNs, but they would have had to seek out the care or the education because it's not usually part of their medical training. But before you even do all of the mental gymnastics to make the appointment happen, what I recommend is when you call to make the appointment, ask what the experience is of the provider you're going to see. The people at the front desk who answer the phones, they know. You'd be really shocked, and they can say, oh yeah, no, they don't, or they're not really seeing patients for this, but so and so does. So they're right there. You can weed out, all of those, a wasted appointment basically. And then the next thing is if you think you are getting to the right place, and maybe it's your own trusted GP, when you walk into that appointment, first of all, recognizing that even though they've got different training and they're the experts, you need to walk into that appointment recognizing that you're a 50-50 part of this appointment, a 50-50 part of the team that's caring for you. And that is really hard. And I definitely want to expand that thought, because we do have there's such a power dynamic difference when we walk into these medical appointments. It typically, for most of us, they're the expert, they know, and they're going to tell us what we're going to do. But knowing that only 1 in 5, even OBGYNs, have any training at all in this space, knowing that walking in, there's a very good chance they have no training in this, which can look like they can say, I can't help you, which happened to me, or they can help you and think they're giving you good care, but they don't even know that they're not. And that's not to say that they're not a great clinician in many other ways, just not in this space. So that was a little bit of a sidetrack, but I feel like I really needed to point that out. And it's not their fault that they don't know. It just has been excluded from medical training for at least a quarter century. And even those that do get training, there's very little and very superficial, and there's not a lot of updates of getting caught up to speed with the way we practice today. So if you do find yourself in that appointment, it is okay to ask, what is your experience or your training taking care of hormone changes in midlife? That is very reasonable. another question of what are my my options, what are my own risks, and what does follow-up look like? How are we going to assess and shift gears and follow up to see how I'm doing? Those might sound scary, but they're very reasonable, and any reasonable provider would welcome a question like that. So hopefully those little nuggets can feel empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. So many of us just schedule the appointment with whoever we can get into, and we don't think to ask, well, what is their expertise? What trainings do they have? We don't question, like you said, we're in a power dynamic differentiation, and we don't think about, well, let me question them in their training, and that's perfectly okay because you're advocating for yourself. The other thing that I wanted to just comment on is you had mentioned we're in that room and we're 50-50. And what I like to tell my clients is you are the expert to your own body. And we have to feel empowered to speak to our body because we absolutely do know. Yes, doctors have an education, or in this case, I had no idea that menopause in this phase of life wasn't really a part of trainings or schooling. That is mind-blowing. But we have to know our bodies and understand them enough to relay the information. And this is why self-awareness is so important. A part of my training, what I do with my clients is becoming self-aware of your body. What are the sensations? What are the patterns that you're seeing? And being able to know that enough to relay it.
So well said. And so that it would involve being a little prepared to go into these appointments. You know, they're very short. They have maybe 10 minutes with you, 5 minutes with you, which is depressing in and of itself to think that. But coming in, feeling empowered, feeling that like if this doesn't feel right, then this isn't the end of the road. There are more options. But being able to talk about patterns, changes, and recognizing that there is hope. There is almost no woman that is, I can't say none, but there's almost no woman that has no options. And going back to the original part of our conversation with libido and our sexual health, which is so, so important, there are absolutely many things we can do to restore that, if not completely, restore it a lot. When we think of the physical changes, if intimacy hurts, we are not going to want to participate. And then that anticipatory excitement of participating gets back to the mental, and it's a vicious circle. And then I see almost every day in my practice, one of the driving things that women will come to me for is their relationship is starting to fall apart. The partner feels rejected. The woman, and you know how those struggles can be. She can't really explain what's happening to her. He just thinks, or she doesn't, you know, it can be really, really devastating. It's no wonder the divorce rate is so high in this stage of life. So it's not a tiny thing to have our sexual health deteriorate or change. And it can be hard for us to talk about, but if you are talking with an expert, they have these conversations every day. Restoring the genitourinary area back to its previous glory is pretty easy to do with vaginal estrogen, and there is almost no woman that cannot use it and doesn't benefit from it. There's a lot of misconceptions about hormone therapy, systemic versus local, but just restoring those tissues to their normal state, so lubrication functions the way it did before, arousal, which gets really diminished as those tissues deteriorate, that can all be restored back. And then I think once a woman, and then this is more complicated and it takes more than just some vaginal estrogen, but if a woman does look at maybe hormone replacement therapy or other modalities that can help her feel like herself again, then that restores how she feels about herself and how she shows up in her sexuality, and again, with or without a relationship. So there is so much hope there. There is so much we can do. And if it has changed and you are not happy with the changes, some women just, they don't care. And that's okay. But for those of us who do think it's just an integral part of who we are, there is hope and there's a lot we can do. And it's doesn't cost a lot, doesn't take a lot of time. Insurance covers it, and we can feel like ourselves again.
That's such a beautiful thing to say to the women here listening, because women do start to feel hopeless. I remember a while back, I was talking to a friend who she was going through menopause, and she's like, I have no sex drive whatsoever. I don't want to be touched. And it was affecting her relationship. And it's important for women to talk to their partner about what they're experiencing so that our partners don't feel rejected. It's not an us issue. It's a biological experience, a hormonal experience. And opening that communication is so important because communication is also a part of intimacy. Being able to feel safe and secure in your relationship and showing up with compassion is so important to support each other through this phase in life is going to help blossom your relationship. And I also want to add that there's so many other things that women can do to feel that intimacy and connection. Having sensual play is also very important and fun. It's not always about the intercourse piece. So I just wanted to add that for any woman out there who's like, I can't have sex right now. Opening communication, having fun in your relationship, having date nights, playing, laughing, those are all things that will help during this phase in life. Would you agree, doctor?
100%, 100%. Especially for a woman, it's all day long. Foreplay is all day long, whether it's physical or emotional. We are built differently than men. And so if we can see ourselves that way, it's not just about those 15 minutes or hopefully longer, but there's just so much more that can bring us joy and pleasure. And I love how you said that.
Yeah, thank you. And one last question for you. What can women do to help their confidence as they're moving through this phase in life, not just with going to the doctor, but really deeply feel beautiful and embrace the transition? Because in my mind, when we're transitioning, you said, hopefully we're outliving our ovaries. And that's what's happening, is that this is another phase in our life. And that is a testimony that we get to live and we get to be a match for our desires. And why not do it with confidence?
Yes, absolutely. I think it starts with education, knowing that not every woman is going to choose to be a mother, for instance, but every woman, if she lives long enough, will go through perimenopause and menopause. So getting educated that this is going to happen, and it may impact you greatly, or it may be easier, but it will happen. So knowing what's coming and not being afraid of it, I think that is a huge thing. And that comes with education, not feeling shame, not fear. And part of that education and the lack of the fear and shame is knowing that there are options that you can choose from, whether it is a hormonal option, non-hormonal option, diet and lifestyle, things that you can do. But I think it first just comes with understanding what's happening. We're so quick to blame ourselves and to shame ourselves, and it doesn't have to be that way. So that would be the overriding thing I want every woman to know. And I think then once she knows that really beautiful things are awaiting, later in life, we're told all the time, unless you're young and beautiful, that's the most important thing in the world. And I'm here to tell you that there's some great stuff waiting while you're going through that transition, as well as on the other side. So those they sound simple, but they, to me, are the key to everything.
Yes, knowledge is power. And you are such a beautiful testimony of there are amazing things on the other side, because you are so vibrant and radiant. I'm so grateful that you are here to share your story and your knowledge with the audience that's listening to this episode. Thank you so much, Doctor, and we appreciate you. Where can we find you? Tell us that.
I do have a virtual telehealth medicine company. It's called thrivemidlifemed.com. All we do is take care of our beautiful midlife women. And even though we are on the West Coast and quickly expanding east, if we're not in your geographic area, again, there's only so many hours in the day anyways, please reach out, because we like-minded colleagues all across the country. And so you don't have to go to an unknown. You can find somebody who really knows this space. I'm happy to point people in the right direction. But my biggest goal is to educate and empower women. And so please reach out. Also, if you're not sure of, some of these things are kind of ambiguous. Like, is this perimenopause or not? And we have a perimenopause quiz on the website. It's awesome. It only takes a couple minutes and the results come back, and it can really point you in the right direction. And so there's a lot of great information on that website to at least give women a launching off place.
Oh, perfect. Yes. So now we know where we can go to assess if we are in premenopause or menopause. And thank you so much for sharing your website. Those links will be in the episode description. So please make sure that you have that information and you're getting the help that you need. Thank you again, Dr. Dana. I so appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. And to all the mamas out there, as always, don't forget to live a liberated, sensual, and unboxed life. Thank you again for listening to Moms Unboxed. Please don't forget to share this episode with all your mommy friends and follow me on Instagram at Moms Unboxed Podcast. Tune in next Thursday for another juicy episode. Until the next time, sunshine.